Why would a man walk back into a burning barn for animals that didn't even belong to him? Smoke pressed low against the rafters, thick and choking, while hooves slammed against the stall doors in blind panic. Caleb's hand slipped on the rope, heat biting through his shirt as something cracked above him. He didn't turn back, not yet. Somewhere in that noise, one horse was still inside, and he knew it. The beam groaned again, and this time it didn't sound like it would hold. If this moment pulled you in, stay with me. There's more to this story than meets the eye. The land sat quiet under a pale Arizona sky, the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty so much as forgotten. Dry Canyon Ridge stretched out in long, tired lines of dust and brittle grass that snapped under a boot. Folks in town didn't ride this far unless they had to. Most of them hadn't set foot here in years. Caleb Turner had. He stood at the edge of what used to be a fence line, a hammer hanging loose in his hand, a coil of wire at his feet. The posts were scattered, some half-rotted, some knocked flat like they'd just given up. The wind moved through the gaps without asking permission. He set a new post, drove it down slow, steady, the kind of rhythm a man learns when there's no one else to hurry him along. 3 weeks earlier, he'd handed over every dollar he had, creased bills, a few coins, to a clerk in a narrow office in town. The man had counted it twice, slid over a receipt with a smudge of ink near the date. Dry Canyon Ridge, 240 acres. Caleb had folded that paper once and tucked it inside his shirt. Hadn't said much, just nodded. People at the general store had watched him that morning. Not unkind, just puzzled. "Place ain't held water since '86, Duke Harlan had said, leaning on the counter with a coffee cup gone cold. "You planning to farm dust?" Caleb had shrugged, picked up a sack of nails and paid in cash. Now he was here, under a sun that didn't forgive, setting posts into ground that fought back with every inch. He paused long enough to wipe his hand across his mouth. The well behind the house had a cracked pulley and a bucket that didn't reach far enough down. He'd tried it the first day, heard nothing but hollow echo. Didn't stop him. He lined up the next post, measured the distance by eye, drove it in. A horse came through the open gate sometime in the afternoon. Caleb heard it before he looked. Hooves on hard ground, not rushed, not cautious either, just certain. He kept working. The horse stopped a few yards off. Leather creaked. Then a voice. "You Caleb Turner?" He didn't answer right away, just drove the post another inch, then another. When it sat firm, he rested the hammer against his leg and turned. The rider sat tall in the saddle, posture easy, like she'd been riding most of her life. The horse beneath her was a deep chestnut, well-kept, expensive without trying to show it. She wore a fitted riding coat the color of dark blue dusk, dustless despite the road. Gloves, boots polished enough to catch the light. Her eyes were steady, not sharp in a cutting way, more like she was measuring something she hadn't decided on yet. "That's me," Caleb said. She studied him for a moment, took in the worn shirt, the sweat-darkened hat, the calluses on his hands. Then she reached into a small leather satchel tied to her saddle. "My name is Lila Monroe," she said. "I've been sent with an offer." He didn't move closer, didn't ask what kind. She pulled out an envelope, held it where he could see. $800, she said. "Cash. You take it, you leave this place. Today." The wind moved between them, carried a bit of dust across the yard. Caleb looked at the envelope, then past it, out toward the line where the land dipped low and the old pasture used to be. He could almost see where the grass might come back, given time. He bent, picked up the hammer again. The next post waited. He set it in place, drove it down. The sound carried, wood meeting earth, steady and sure. "You heard me," Lila said. He nodded once, not looking at hers. I did. Another strike. The post sank deeper. Then you understand, she said. You don't have to stay here. You don't have to fight this land. He adjusted the angle slightly, hit it again. Miss Monroe, he said, voice even. This land cost me 10 years. He paused, just a second, enough to line up the next blow. $800 don't buy that back. The hammer fell. Silence settled again, thicker this time. Lila didn't speak right away. She watched him finish setting the post, watched the way he tested it with both hands, the way he didn't rush the small things. You know what this place is? She asked finally. Caleb glanced toward the house. One side of the roof sagged where a beam had given out. The door hung crooked. Yeah, he said. I do. And you're staying anyway. He wiped his hands on his pants, looked at her properly this time. Yeah. She held his gaze a moment longer than most would. Not challenging, not soft either. Just there. Then she slid the envelope back into her satchel. All right, she said. She turned the horse with a light pull on the reins. The animal responded easy, like it trusted her without question. At the gate, she slowed, looked back. Not quick, not polite. Long enough to take in the fence, the posts he'd set, the man standing there like he belonged even if nothing else did. Then she faced forward again and rode out, the sound of hooves fading into the open land. Caleb stood where he was for a while after she was gone. The wind picked up a little, moved through the new stretch of fence and the broken pieces beyond it. He set his jaw, lifted the hammer, and walked to the next gap. There was still a lot of land left to claim, and for the first time since he'd stepped onto Dry Canyon Ridge, something about that didn't feel quite as quiet as it had before. Caleb woke before sunrise the next morning. Same as always. The air still held a bit of night's cool, enough to make the first sip of coffee taste sharper. He drank it black, sitting on the porch step with the tin cup warming his hands. The ridge stretched out in front of him, pale and waiting. He finished the coffee, set the cup down by the door, and went back to the fence. By mid-morning, the sun had burned off whatever mercy the dawn had offered. Sweat ran down his back, dust clung to his boots. He worked through it, same steady rhythm, same quiet. He didn't expect her to come back. That was why he noticed the horse before he heard it. Same chestnut, same easy stride. He didn't turn this time. Lila Monroe rode through the open gate like she had the day before. No envelope in her hand. No satchel hanging loose. She stopped near the line he'd started that morning and watched him set a post. He let her watch. The hammer rose and fell. The post went in straight. Too straight. You're setting it wrong, she said. Caleb paused, just long enough to rest the hammer against his shoulder. Then he drove the post one more inch. Looks fine from here, he said. It won't hold come winter, she replied. He turned then, looked at her without hurry. You planning on being here come winter? He asked. She slid down from the saddle without answering, tied the reins to a low branch like she'd done it 100 times before. Then she stepped through the gap in the fence and walked over. Up close, there was dust on her boots this time. Not much, but enough. She stopped by the post he'd just set and crouched slightly, running her fingers along the line of it. The soil shifted after the last drought, she said. You drive it straight. It'll lean by the first hard wind. Caleb watched her hands. Steady. Sure. She stood, brushed her palms together, then reached for the post without asking. Tilted it just a touch. Not much. Maybe 2 degrees. Like that, she said. She stepped back. Caleb didn't move right away. Then he set the hammerhead against the top and drove it down again. The wood settled, held. He tested it. It didn't give. He glanced at her. "Appreciate it," he said. She gave a small nod, like that was enough. For a while they worked without saying anything else. She didn't hover, didn't instruct every step, just moved along the line, adjusting where it needed it, leaving it alone where it didn't. Caleb found himself checking the angle before each strike. Didn't mention it. By noon, the sun sat heavy overhead. Caleb walked back toward the house, pulled a cloth from a nail by the door, and wiped his face. He picked up the tin cup, filled it halfway from a small barrel he'd hauled in 2 days earlier. He hesitated, then set it down on the edge of the porch. Lila came up a moment later. She didn't ask, just took the cup, drank, and set it back in the same spot. "Your well's dry," she said. "Yeah. You tried digging deeper?" "Ground's hard as rock past 10 feet. She looked out toward the far end of the property. The land dipped there, almost too subtle to notice unless you knew what you were looking for. "There's water," she said. "Just not where the old well is." Caleb followed her gaze. Didn't say anything. She turned back to him. "You ever seen a map of this place?" she asked. "No." "I have." He leaned one shoulder against the porch post. Waited. She didn't go on. Not right away. Instead, she stepped back toward the fence, picked up the driver he'd left in the dirt, and set the next post herself. Caleb watched her for a second, then walked over and took up the wire. They worked side by side until the light started to soften. No talk of money. No talk of leaving. Just the sound of wood, wire, and breath. Late in the afternoon, a rider appeared on the ridge to the east, far enough to be just a shape against the sky. He didn't come down, just sat there, watching. Lila noticed him first, her hand stilled on the post she was setting. Caleb followed her gaze. "Friend of yours?" he asked. She shook her head once. "No." They stood there a moment longer. The rider didn't move. Then Lila set the post the rest of the way, handed the driver back to Caleb, and wiped her hands on her skirt. "I should go," she said. Caleb nodded. She untied her horse, swung up in one smooth motion, and turned toward the gate. Halfway through, she slowed, looked back at the line of fence they'd built together, then at him. There was something like a question in it this time. Not spoken, not pushed, just there. Then she faced forward and rode out. Caleb stood with the driver in his hand, listening to the fading rhythm of hooves. Out on the ridge, the other rider turned his horse and disappeared. The land went quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet. Caleb drove the next post at a slight angle without thinking about it. And when he stepped back, he didn't bother checking if it was right. He already knew. The next few days passed the same way. Work in the morning, work through the heat. A break only when the sun made the air feel too heavy to breathe. Lila came and went without a pattern Caleb could name. Some days she was there before noon, already tying her horse to the same low branch. Other days she didn't come at all, and the land felt a little wider for it. When she was there, the work moved faster. Not easier, just cleaner. She showed him where the ground dipped after a rare rain, where the old creek line used to run before it shifted years back. She marked it in the dirt with the heel of her boot, then stepped away and let him decide what to do with it. He started bringing 2 cups out in the morning. Didn't say anything about it. She started bringing a folded piece of paper tucked into her coat, a rough map, lines drawn by hand, smudged in places where fingers had traced them too often. They didn't talk about why she had it. One afternoon, she stood by the broken well, looking down into it like she was listening for something. "Water runs under here," she said quietly. Not deep, just wrong place. Caleb leaned against the post behind her. You sure? She nodded once. Been sure since I was a kid. He didn't ask how she knew, just looked out across the land again, seeing it a little different this time. That same afternoon, the rider on the ridge came back. Closer now. Close enough to make out the shape of a hat. The stillness of a man who wasn't passing through, just watching. Lila noticed him again. This time she didn't stop working. Won't be long now, she said. Caleb drove the next post in. Figured as much. The rider turned and rode off before sunset. 2 days later, the dust on the far road rose again. But this time it didn't settle at the ridge. It came straight through the gate. The man on the horse was older, broad through the shoulders, even sitting down. His coat was cut clean, his boots polished but worn enough to show they'd been used. He didn't hurry. Didn't look around like he needed to learn the place. He already knew it. Caleb set the hammer down before the horse even stopped. The man dismounted slow, tied his reins without looking. Then he walked the fence line, one hand brushing lightly along the wire. Testing. Measuring. When he reached the post Lila had corrected days before, he stopped, pressed against it, felt the angle. His eyes shifted, just slightly. Then he turned to Caleb. You've been busy, he said. His voice was even, not loud, the kind that didn't need to be. Yes, sir, Caleb answered. The man nodded once, then looked past him toward the house. The sagging roof. The empty well. My daughter's been spending time here, he said. Caleb didn't glance back. She has. She told me you wouldn't take the offer. That's right. The man stepped closer, boots quiet in the dust. This land will take years, he said. More than you have saved. More than you can carry alone. Caleb didn't answer. The wind moved through the fence again, rattling the wire just enough to be heard. My daughter has options, the man continued. A future that doesn't involve waiting on a place like this to become something it isn't yet. Caleb picked up the hammer, turned it once in his hand. She ain't waiting on me, he said. She comes and goes as she pleases. The man studied him for a moment. Long enough to make most men shift their weight. Caleb didn't. What she pleases, the man said, is not always what she needs. Caleb met his eyes then. That's her call, he said. The silence that followed held a different weight than before. Not empty. Not calm. Measured. The man's jaw tightened just enough to notice. Then it was gone. He stepped back, brushed his hands together like he was clearing dust that wasn't there. I won't say this twice, he said. You keep your distance. From her, from my business, from anything that carries my name. Caleb didn't move. The man turned, walked back to his horse, and mounted in one smooth motion. At the gate, he paused. Some land doesn't change, he said without looking back. No matter how long you stay. Then he rode out, the sound of hooves fading slower than Lila's had. Caleb stood there a long time after. The hammer hung at his side again. The fence stretched out ahead, still unfinished. He set the next post anyway. The ground fought him harder this time. He drove it in, one strike at a time. Toward evening, a shadow crossed the yard again. Lila. She didn't ride in as far this time, just stopped by the fence and slid down from the saddle. You saw him, she said. Caleb nodded. She looked at the line of posts, then back at him. He'll make things harder, she said. Probably. She stepped closer, picking up the wire where it had slipped loose. I'm still coming back, she said, not looking at him. Caleb took the wire from her, pulled it tight. I figured, he said. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Small, almost quiet enough to miss. Then she reached for the next post. And together, without saying anything more, they went back to work as the light began to fall. The land stretched out around them, unchanged. But something in it had already started to shift. It showed up in small ways first. The man at the feed store in town stopped offering credit. Didn't say why. Just shook his head and pointed to the cash drawer. The well digger Caleb had spoken to the week before never came back. Left a message with Mrs. Keller. Said he'd taken work farther south. Even the boy who used to ride out with spare wire once a week stopped coming. Caleb didn't ask questions. He counted what he had left. Nails in a small wooden box. 2 coils of wire. A sack of oats he'd been stretching out with care. He worked slower. Not by choice. Lila kept coming. She didn't mention the changes. Not the empty road. Not the way people in town had started watching her a little longer than before. One morning, she arrived with her sleeves rolled higher than usual and went straight to the well. "Help me with this," she said. They rigged a new pulley from an old wagon wheel Caleb had pulled from the barn. The wood creaked, the rope burned his palms, but the bucket went deeper this time. When it came back up, there was a thin line of water at the bottom. Not much, but enough. Lila didn't smile. She just set the bucket down and wiped her hands. "See?" she said. Caleb looked at the water like it was something alive. That afternoon, clouds gathered low over the ridge. Not rain, just the kind that held heat down and made the air sit heavy. They worked until the light went thin. Lila stayed longer than usual. "You should head back," Caleb said, nodding toward the darkening road. She glanced at the sky, then at the far hills. "I will," she said. But she didn't move right away. Instead, she walked the fence line one more time, running her fingers along the wire like she was memorizing it. Caleb watched her go when she finally left. The sound of her horse faded slower that evening. The night settled in quiet. Then sometime past midnight, the wind shifted. Caleb woke before he knew why. The smell came first. Smoke. He was on his feet before the thought finished forming. Pulled on his boots, grabbed his coat, stepped out into the dark. The northern horizon glowed faint orange, not lightning. Fire. He didn't stand there long. The saddle went on fast. The horse moved before Caleb had both feet in the stirrups. The ride was hard, fast. The kind that left no room for doubt. As he crested the rise near Monroe Land, the glow turned into flame. A barn was already burning. The fire climbed the wood like it had been waiting for it. Men moved in the yard below, forming a line from the well, passing buckets hand to hand. Horses stamped and pulled against their ties. Caleb slid off his horse before it stopped moving. "Where?" he called. No one answered him directly. They were all looking at the same thing. The second barn. The doors were shut. Smoke pushed through the cracks. Inside, the horses were hitting the walls. The sound carried clear, sharp against the noise of the fire. Caleb moved toward it. A man caught his arm. "Roof's going," he said. "Too far gone." Caleb looked past him at the door. "How many?" he asked. The man hesitated. 10, maybe more. Caleb pulled his arm free. There wasn't anything in his face. No anger. No rush. Just decision. He grabbed a bucket from the line, dumped it over his shirt, tied a cloth across his mouth, and went to the door. It stuck the first time he pulled. He braced his foot, pulled again. It gave. Heat rushed out. Thick and close. The first horse came wild, eyes wide, fighting the rope. Caleb held steady, spoke low, the way men do when they've handled animals long enough to know when words don't matter. He got it out, turned it loose, Went back in. Second, third, each time slower, each time harder. The smoke thickened. The beams above shifted, groaning in a way that said they wouldn't hold forever. Someone shouted from outside. He didn't turn. On the fourth trip, he stumbled, caught himself against the stall, breath coming shorter now. The horse beside him kicked the wood, panic running through it like a current. Caleb reached for the halter anyway. "Easy," he said, voice rough behind the cloth. He let it out. The air hit him hard. He bent forward, hands on his knees, pulling in what breath he could. "Enough," someone called. "It's coming down." Caleb looked back at the doorway. Still movement inside. Still sound. He straightened, walked past the man who tried to stop him, went back in. The last two came together, one pulling against the other, ropes tangled. He cut one loose, led the other out by hand. The beam cracked as he crossed the threshold, a sound like something giving up. He pushed the horse forward, cleared the door, and the roof came down behind him. The force of it hit the ground like a wave. Caleb dropped where he stood. The world narrowed to heat and dust and the sound of his own breathing. For a while he didn't move. Then hands were on his shoulders, pulling him up, sitting him back down again. Voices blurred. He looked up once. Across the yard, Victor Monroe stood near the edge of the firelight, not shouting, not giving orders, just watching, counting the horses as they were led away. When he reached the last one, he stopped. His gaze shifted, found Caleb sitting in the dirt. They held that look for a second. No words, just the fire between them and something else that hadn't been there before. By morning, the fire was out. The barn was gone. Caleb rode back at first light. Slow this time. The smoke followed him halfway to the ridge. By the time he reached his own gate, his breath came rough and shallow. His hands shook when he reached for the latch. He made it to the porch. Sat down. Didn't get back up. The sun climbed. The land stayed still. And somewhere in the distance a hammer struck wood, steady, unfamiliar, not his. Caleb sat on the porch longer than he meant to. The boards were warm under him now, the sun already high enough to press down on everything. His chest felt tight when he breathed, like the air had to work harder to get in. The sound came again. Wood on wood, measured, patient. He pushed himself up and stepped off the porch, slower than usual. The yard looked the same, fence line half finished, tools where he'd left them. But out in the north field, two men were working. Not boys, not drifters, ranch hands. They moved with the kind of rhythm that came from years of doing the same thing right. One drove the post, the other set the wire. No wasted motion. Caleb walked toward them, boots dragging a little in the dust. They noticed him, but didn't stop. "Mr. Turner," the older one said after a moment, like he'd been expecting him to come out eventually. Caleb nodded once. "Morning." The younger man pulled the wire tight, looped it clean, and moved on to the next section. "Mr. Monroe sent us," the older one said. Caleb looked past them, across the field they were cutting through. The line they'd started was straight, better than anything he could have done that morning. "He didn't say nothing last night," Caleb said. "No, sir," the man replied. "He didn't." The hammer rose and fell again. Caleb stood there, hands loose at his sides. For a second, it sat in him, the old habit. The one that said a man finishes what he starts. The one that didn't leave room for help. He glanced down at his hands. The skin across his knuckles was raw. The cloth wrapped around his palm had darkened where the burn had started to break through. He looked back up. The men had already moved another post down the line. "Field won't wait," the older one said, not unkindly. "Oats'll turn if we don't get to it." Caleb swallowed once. The tightness in his chest shifted, just enough. "All right," he said. The word came out quieter than he expected. He stepped back. Let them pass him. Walked back toward the porch. Inside the house, the air was cooler. He sat at the small table by the window and rested his hands flat against the wood. Outside, the sound of work carried steady. Not rushed, not loud, just there. By afternoon, another horse came through the gate. Lila. She didn't ride straight up this time. Slowed near the fence, taking in the line the men had already set. Her eyes moved from post to post, then to the field beyond. Caleb stepped out onto the porch. "They started early," he said. She nodded. "I know." He watched her dismount. She tied her horse without looking at him, the same way she always did. "My father didn't send a message," she said. "No, he won't." Caleb leaned one shoulder against the post. The wood was rough under his shirt. "Still sent them," he said. Lila walked over to the fence line, ran her hand along the wire, feeling the tension. "He counts things," she said after a moment. "Land, cattle, time." She stopped at one of the new posts, pressed against it the way her father had done days before. "This," she added, quieter. "He doesn't know how to count yet." Caleb didn't answer. She turned then, looked at him proper. "You shouldn't be out here," she said. "Not today." "I'm all right." She held his gaze a second longer, not arguing, just waiting. Caleb pushed off the post and stepped down from the porch anyway, took a few steps toward the field. The breath caught halfway. He stopped. Not dramatic, just a small pause that didn't belong. Lila saw it. She didn't rush over, didn't make a show of it, just walked up beside him, close enough that her shoulder almost touched his. "You don't have to prove anything today," she said. Caleb looked out across the land, the men working, the fence holding straight. "I know," he said. They stood there a while. The wind moved through the wire, low and steady, the kind of sound that settles in once things start holding together. Late in the day, another rider came through the gate. Victor Monroe. He didn't look at the house this time, didn't stop at the yard. He rode straight to the fence line, dismounted, walked it. Same as before. Hand on the wire. Testing. Reading. He stopped at one of the posts the men had set that morning, pressed against it, checked the angle. Then he moved on. Caleb and Lila stood back, letting him pass without speaking. When he reached the end of the line, he turned. His eyes settled on Caleb. "You went back in," he said. Not a question. Caleb nodded once. Victor held that look for a moment, longer than he had before. Then he stepped closer. "When no one asked you to," he added. The words sat between them, simple, heavy. Caleb didn't answer. Victor glanced once toward the men in the field, then back to Caleb. "I won't stand in your way anymore," he said. No change in his voice, no softness added to it. Just a line drawn somewhere new. Lila let out a breath, small and quiet. Victor didn't look at her. He turned, walked back to his horse and mounted. At the gate, he paused. Not long. Then he rode out. The dust settled behind him slower than before. Caleb stood there, the weight in his chest easing just enough to notice. He turned toward Lila. She was already walking back to the fence, picked up the hammer one of the men had set down. He followed her, slower now, but steady. When he reached her, she held the hammer out. "You staying?" he asked, voice low. "Or just helping?" She didn't answer. Not right away. just took the hammer back from him, set the next post in place and drove it down. Once, twice. Then she stepped back, glanced at him, and moved on to the next. Caleb watched her for a second. Then he reached for the wire. The sun dipped lower over Dry Canyon Ridge, and for the first time the land didn't feel like something he was holding together alone. If you stood there in Caleb's place, with dust on your boots, a past that didn't promise much, and a future that asked more than you knew how to give, you might understand how quiet victories feel. Not loud, not celebrated, just a steady breath coming easier than it did the day before. He didn't win the land in a single moment. He didn't win her with words. And he didn't change a man like Victor Monroe by proving anything out loud. It happened in smaller ways, in showing up, in staying when it would have been easier to walk, in doing the right thing when nobody was counting. That's the part people don't talk about much. Sometimes love doesn't arrive like a storm. Sometimes it comes in beside you, picks up a hammer, and stays. And maybe that's the kind of life most of us are trying to build. Not perfect, not easy, just honest enough to stand. If this story stayed with you, I'd like to hear where you were while listening. What part felt familiar? There are more stories out there like this one, waiting in quiet places, in lives that don't look like much at first glance. And if you choose to stay a little longer, I'll be right here to tell them.